You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the Fourth Doctor story, Nightmare of Eden. And joining me today, as always, is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to help us out on the podcast by going to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from and write a review, give a rating, whatever it takes. That helps us a lot to get the show out in front of more Doctor Who fans and reach more listeners and grow this community. So we really do appreciate that. I do want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you may not have heard about, but I'm sure you'll enjoy, called The Secrets of Sacred Art. That is another video podcast that we do. It's also available as audio. But it's a great discussion about Catholic art and sacred art in general. And so you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/sacredart. And you'll also find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia.
And it's even better if you can see the sacred art they're talking about, because as Laurie Anderson said, quoting someone, I believe, talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
That's right. They do their best to help out folks who listen to the audio, but it's really best as a video podcast. So you should definitely check that out online if you can. All right, let's talk about this Fourth Doctor story, Nightmare of Eden. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this one?
This week, the Fourth Doctor, the Second Romana, and the Second K9 get caught in the middle of drug trafficking. It's taken place aboard a starliner called the Empress, which phases back into normal space at the same point as another ship, the Hecate, which is doing the same thing, phasing back into normal space. The two ships are partially merged with dimensional interfaces between them at various points. These dimensional interfaces interfere with the operation of a primitive electronic zoo that a conservationist named Trist has. The zoo contains transfers of planetary habitats that have been stored on data crystals, but because of the unstable dimensional interfaces, people and monsters known as mandrills can get into and out of the zoo projections. But back to the drug trafficking plot. The first officer of the Starliner is hopped up on a space drug called Vraxoan, and this drug is so dangerous that it eventually kills you, and it's destroyed whole planets. As a result, the authorities incinerated the planet that was its source, but a new source has apparently been discovered. It turns out that source is the planet Eden, and the mandrill monsters turn into Vraxoan when they're electrocuted. The Doctor eventually manages to separate the two ships, and it's revealed that the conservationist Trist is the drug smuggler, and he's in league with the captain of the other ship, the Hecate. So when the two ships are separated, they take an electronic copy of the Eden data crystal and flee. But the Doctor uses K9 to extend the range of the electronic zoo and captures their spaceship inside it, allowing them to be taken into custody by the authorities. The end.
So Jimmy, what did you think of this one?
Well, it's not as bad as I remembered. This has a reputation of being like one of the hardest episodes of Doctor Who ever to shoot. The director reportedly got into repeated conflicts with everybody, and people said he didn't know what he was doing and he didn't want to learn. And he got into a huge conflict with Tom Baker and quit in the middle of filming, which means the producer, Graham Williams, had to finish directing the series. Williams then decided he wanted to leave the show, which he did at the end of the series. It was so bad.
Wow.
And Douglas Adams, who was the script editor at the time, decided he wanted to leave the show too. So this was really rough behind the scenes. And my memory is that my memory was that it's worse than it is. Like I remember, because we've got this drug plot, and this is a children's television show, they have to come down really hard on this drug. This is not normal space dope. And so Tom Baker has these, savage lines about, I've seen whole planets destroyed by this drug and stuff like that. And my memory was that he said them over dramatically. much more dramatically than he actually did on rewatching them. So it's not as bad as I remember, but it's not, and it has some nice stuff in it, but it's not great.
Right.
The monsters in particular are poorly executed. Their heads are okay, but their bodies look ridiculous. They're not very threatening. I remember back in the 1980s. Now this came out in like 79 or something.
Yeah.
And between 1980 and 1982, there was a variety show on TV here in America called Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters. And I remember at a science fiction convention seeing an illustration based on this episode where you had 3 Mandrell monsters together as Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters. I think that was OakCon in Oklahoma City, in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And so people, that's not here nor there, but another problem the serial has is the Doctor is continually getting distracted. After they land on the space liner, which is merged with the Hecate, the Doctor's first thought is we need to pull these ships apart. And he's got sciencey ways to do that. And he keeps getting distracted from that task. It doesn't happen until the middle of episode 4.
Right.
And so we keep having these repeated interrupted efforts to separate the ships with the Doctor getting distracted by other stuff. And so it has this jangly plot development. Also, and this is just a personal thing, I really hate the way they pronounce the name of the other ship, Hecate.
Right.
Because this is a Greek word. This is the name of the goddess of the underworld and magic, and it is pronounced Hecate.
Yeah.
But British people repeatedly, and not just British, but Americans too, can look at it and say Hecate, and it's like, no, it's Hecate.
Yeah. I always said Hecate, but yeah, but
Hecate would, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got an epsilon on the end of it.
You'd say the letter, though. That's the thing. Yeah. I thought when you mentioned the Mandrels, I thought you were going to mention H.R. Puffin stuff, because it looks like one of the, they're darker versions of one of the creatures from H.R. Puffin stuff, which was a kid's
Oh, yeah. I remember
show.
H.R. Puffin stuff. I don't remember anything that looked exactly like this, though.
Was it H.R. Puffin stuff or... Oh, it might have been a different one. There were a lot of these kids shows where they had like costumed creatures like this guy, guys in a outfit thing. If it wasn't H.R. Puffin stuff, it might have been la 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 la.
No, that's the Banana Splits.
Banana Splits, right? Might have been one of those. In any case, Gen X memory. So I thought I had not seen this before, obviously, and. If people don't know, this is my first time through a lot of Classic Who, and I thought it was okay. I did read about, I did read about how it was a troubled production from the beginning. So before I even watched it, so I was kind of preparing myself for that, and so that might have made it, come out better in my mind than it would have otherwise, I guess. But I like the Doctor and Romana in this one. She had plenty to do. They had K9 in there. I always enjoy seeing K9 trundling around doing his thing. The guest cast was pretty good. Now, speaking of guest cast, last time we talked about, last week, the Time Warrior, which was a third Doctor story, and we had Iron Gron, the bad guy. Well, he shows up again. That actor was the actor who played the captain of this passenger liner.
Wow, you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. So this is, 6-7 years later or whatever, but he looks very different, but it's the same guy. I looked it up, made sure, Captain Rigg. So I thought the morality play about drug use was heavy-handed, obviously. They really wanted to hammer that home, and it was late 70s, early 80s that was the thing in children's TV programming, to be heavy-handed about it.
Yeah, and both of the characters who actually are on the drug, there's sort of the first officer of the ship,
Yeah.
who's a guy named Secker, and he's apparently on it voluntarily, but he ends up dying. And
Right.
then the other is Captain Rigg himself. At one point, he drinks something that has been spiked with it,
Yep.
and he unknowingly becomes high, and he ends up dying too. So even though they don't directly die from the effects of the drug in this case, they say that you will eventually die from it. And it's just, there are drugs that'll kill you, but if they were always fatal, people wouldn't use them really.
Right.
Or so it's a little implausible that it's that destructive and has destroyed whole planets.
Right. It's a bit over the top. Apparently they had other names for the drug that they were going to use, that like Zip or Zap or whatever. And they thought that it was too cutesy. It would sound appealing to kids.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's even a relic of that in the script. When the doctor first finds some of it and has K9 analyze it, he says it's fungus. And then he gives the name of the fungus, and it's clearly an abbreviation. It was going to be called something like xylophyllin or ZIP for short.
Right.
And the name of the fungus is clearly based on the initials for that.
Oh.
But then K9 says also known as Vraxoin, which is what they use from there on, and it's abbreviated as Vrax, and that's supposed to sound less appealing to children.
So another production element, before we get back into the story, I do want to point out is the special effects. Now, Doctor Who special effects in the 70s and 80s was never Star Trek Next Generation level. It was never that quality that you had in other shows of the time, or even Battlestar Galactica. It was pretty bare bones. But even in this one, they switched apparently filming the outer space models from film, which they'd always done, to videotape, and that just made it look even more like toys hanging off of strings. And it was a cost-saving measure. They apparently stopped doing it after this, but gosh, it just made. This was one of the reasons why I didn't watch Doctor Who as a kid, because I saw one of these episodes and I'm like, the special effects were so bare bones and basic. I thought, I'll go watch Star Trek, or like even Star Trek from the 60s had better special effects than the Doctor Who did. So
yeah, and I concede that, although to me that never mattered. It's like with comic books, I don't care so much about the art. I care about the writing.
Yeah.
And so if there's a good writer, even if they're paired with a not so good artist, I'll still read the comic. But in the same way, if the writing is enjoyable for a TV show, I can look past the primitive special effects.
Right. As a kid, I was much more into the special effects, and now I can appreciate the stories, which so I'm glad to come back and see this now. By the way,
So a couple of other nitpicks while we're getting our nitpicks out of the way. This is apparently set in the year 2116. And the way we know that is the doctor, when he shows up on the ship, he passes himself off as some kind of inspector from this galactic inspection company. And it's like, if only he had the psychic paper. He could have really sold that. But that's not part of the lore at this point, so that's fine. But the captain, Rigg, then when the doctor's out of the room, looks up the company that the doctor says he works for, and it was founded in like the year 2068, and it went out of business in the year 2096. And then the captain says to the doctor, that was 20 years ago. In fact, in the exchanges, he asks the doctor, who are you really? And the doctor says, well, I told you I'm from Galactic. And Rigg says, Galactic went out of business 20 years ago. The doctor says, I wondered why I hadn't been paid. Rigg says, now that's not good enough. And the doctor says, that's what I thought. which is a really nice exchange. But the data nugget there is the company went out of business 20 years ago. So that would mean this is happening in the year 2116, which is less than a century from now.
Yes.
And it's like, there's no way we're going to have the technology they show in this in less than 100 years. So I thought that was unbelievable. They should have said it in the farther future, but that's a dialogue fix. That's not so bad. One thing, though, that is a little harder is some of the visual design. Now, the spaceship itself looks fine. The sets look fine. But this is a Starliner, and they've got people. So that's like the equivalent of a cruise ship. And even though these people are supposed to be economy class, they're like jammed in when we see the passengers.
Like an airline.
Like an airplane, yeah.
Yeah.
They're just jammed into these seats, and they're all wearing silver hoodies with giant sunglasses, which the crew are not wearing. Or
other passengers, like in the first class.
Yeah, and so it looks stupid. And the fact they're silver is just a trope of, like it's science fiction, so it has to be silver. Mm-hmm. And if you look closely at their chairs, they're all different. They're different kinds of office chairs that have been crammed together in an otherwise open space.
Yeah.
It's, again, that's a budgetary thing, but it with the silver hoodies and the giant sunglasses, it does not look good.
No. Yeah. It makes it look cheap. And
it is.
And there was no reason for it. There was no, why did we, did we want to not have to make up costumes? I guess that maybe that was the thing. We didn't want to have to come up with individual costumes that look futuristic for everyone. We just put them in silver hoodie jumpsuits and sunglasses and call that a costume, I guess. So we have this cast of characters that we've run into. Secker dies early, so we don't really see much of him. He's apathetic. That seems to be the main outcome of the drug. It makes you just really apathetic about everything.
Yeah, and not just apathetic, but happily apathetic. So you're like, he and the captain are amused by horrible developments,
right?
And can't really be bothered to take care of them. And then when you come down, you become irritable and irrational.
Right. You need to get more. You become violent.
Need your fix, and you're really aggressive about it.
And then we also have this scientist called Trist and his assistant. And Trist has the improbable work of cataloging every species in the galaxy, and he's almost done. Like, he's got them all. I'm like, you can't even catalog every species on this planet. It's billions of species. That's
improbable. Also, his assistant's name is Della, and she's fine as a character. She's competent. Trist has a vaguely German accent, and he's wearing these little rectangular sunglasses that make his eyes look all squinty and block him out, and so that I guess they were considered cool or something, but they also play into his and he initially seems very friendly, but then by the end they're playing into his villain vibe,
right?
And so that's okay, but I have a little trouble with his name. One of the things that I've noticed in this period of Doctor Who is people often have monosyllabic names with stop consonants. So especially at the end, final stops. So his name is Trist. Later we meet a planetary figure from the planet they've come to, Azure, whose name is Fisk. Notice the K is the final consonant stop, and final stop consonant. And a stop consonant is one where you completely close off the airflow. So K and T are both stops. And I just noticed lots of monosyllabic names with stop consonants at the end in this period. Trask would be another.
Stott.
Oh yeah, Stott. That's another one from this very story.
Diamond,
the way they say it.
Yeah.
But that's bisyllabic, so it's not quite the same.
Is Rig? The substance.
Rig is related, but it's not exactly the same. But you see what I mean.
I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah. But tryst it's got a meaning.
It does.
It's a romantic encounter. Usually an illicit one. And it's even spelled the same. Tryst is spelled with a Y, and the character's name is spelled, it's Tryst.
Yeah.
It's like, this means something in English. What's going on here? Because it doesn't seem to fit his character.
It never comes up. There's nothing romantic or other. I mean, the only thing you could say is, like, if you remove the romantic nature of it, he's there for an illicit meeting with the guy from the Hecate. Hecate. I mean, it is weird sometimes when you get a name that has a meaning that doesn't have anything to do with it, and it's a distraction for a viewer who knows.
Yeah,
that is bad.
And speaking of names, there's a bit I like where they call the guys from the planet Azure who come up, and they are in ridiculous uniforms.
Yeah,
they're black leather with strips of black sparkles on them.
Like weird space Nazis or something.
Yeah, it's like weird gay space Nazis or something. But one of them is named Waterguard Fist, and the other is Waterguard, which is, I guess, an office they have at ports, at seagoing ports.
Yeah.
And then the other is Landing Officer Costa. And there's one bit where Costa is quizzing the doctor and Romana about their names and birth dates. And the doctor says, "Will you please listen? Someone aboard this ship is smuggling drugs." Costa repeats and says, "Name and date of birth." "Well, how would I know? I don't even know who he is yet." "Your name and date of birth." "Oh, well, I'm called the doctor. Dates of birth are difficult to remember. Sometime quite soon, I think." Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, that was a really good one. And Romana has a good line right about then. She says, "I've never met such idiots as these customs men." Oh, and then the doctor's line is what's good. "Idiots, they're worse than idiots. They're bureaucrats. They just exist to tangle people up, wrap them round and round in red tape until they can't move." And I'm like, was it Bob Baker, Billy Baker, whoever, the writer? Tell us how you really feel about bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's almost worthy of Robert Holmes. And then the doctor says, "Romana," and she says, "Yes, I can't move." And it's because he's been grabbed by the tendrils of a giant Venus flytrap plant.
Yes.
And they're wrapped around him like the red tape he's just been speaking of.
Right.
I also have a note that this is a pretty creepy Venus flytrap plant, and it looks slippery. It looks like they put, I don't know, KY jelly all over it or something to make it have that gloss.
Yeah.
And so it for the, despite the low budget, it actually looks pretty good as a plant.
Right. Yeah. The Eden set was dark.
It was too dark, in fact.
Yeah. But I think they were trying to go for that creepy dark, and it's funny, that it's Eden. It's supposed to be like Eden as a garden of, delight that, from the Bible. And this was anything but that.
This was
the
like
opposite.
A swamp. Yeah.
So,
by the way, one more thing, one more bit of dialogue that I really like. So at the end, the doctor is hooking up Canine to the electronic zoo, which they call the CET machine for continuous event transmuter.
Yeah.
So he's hooking him up to the electronic zoo to extend its range so he can grab the Hecate. And it needs more power. And so what they're doing is they're hooking up, Romana suggests they hook up the jumper cables or the power leads to Canine. And they are hooking them onto his two rotating little radio dish antennas. And the doctor says, they don't have enough power. And the doctor says, "We're going to need some more power from somewhere." Romana says, "We could put the jump leads on Canine." The doctor says, "Good." And then they bend down to put them on they're function like his ears. And as they're putting them on, the doctor says, "Good dog, Canine. Come on, put your leads on there." And in England, a dog leash is what they call a lead.
Yes.
So you put your dog on a lead, and we've got some nice wordplay here with, put your leads on. And I just, even though it doesn't mean the same thing in the double entendre is not there in American English, it is there in British English, and I appreciate it.
Right. Let's talk about the continuous event transmuter. So it's this device that, as Trist explains it first, I'm not sure if he says it differently, but I got the impression that he originally meant it takes an image or makes a copy of an environment, but it actually takes that environment and puts it in a recording in the machine.
Yeah, and Romana notes that the implication is he's left bare patches on different planets where he's basically scooped up bits of their environments.
Yeah.
And it's basically a mini scope, which we saw in that third Doctor story.
Yeah.
Carnival of Monsters.
That's right.
It's basically a mini scope.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a repeat of that, of that device.
I did like the alien worlds that we get to see.
Yeah.
They only build a practical set for Eden, but it's got a dial, and Romana turns the dial and looks at the different planets that it's stored. And they actually took images from Space 1999 of different planets and used them because they look higher budget than you would think. Yeah. And they look really alien. I like them.
Yep. I always liked Space 1999.
It moves really slowly, though, if you watch it as an adult. Oh,
I'd be interested to see it again as an adult. I love the Eagles, the spaceships, because I'm a ship geek. The idea of Trist as drug smuggler and using this device as a way to smuggle the mandrels, who are the source of the drug, I thought that was a kind of clever idea. It was an interesting way for, if someone were to do this, this is an interesting way to do it, because all he's got is this device, this scientific instrument that he could pass through customs, and it's small, so you could smuggle a lot of whatever it is recorded in it.
And because they're just recorded on data crystals, the drugs won't show up on a scan.
Yeah.
If you scan it, you're going to see a crystal. You're not going to see the drug that is recorded on the crystal.
Right.
So that's notable. I also like how his logic, as a villain. So even though and I guess this is meant to show the slippery slope of drugs, maybe, but I also find it plausible because he is on this quest to catalog life on all these different planets. And early on, they talk about his funding difficulties. He says, the government used to fund me, but then the galactic recession put an end to that. So there's some more economics for us.
Right.
And now he's supported by private foundations and donors and stuff. And he says, in fact, on Azure, I'm supposed to meet with the donor. And so he says that like in episode 1, he's had funding troubles for his conservation work. And then in episode 4, he and Della are talking once he's outed as the drug smuggler. And she's, rebuking him for it. And he says, it started as just a little thing to help me over a slight financial difficulty. The cost of the expedition that was bankrupted me. So the reason he got into drugs is not because he's a fundamentally evil guy. He was just cutting corners. And then Della makes the counterpoint, but Vrax is destroying people by the millions. And Trist said, I had to continue my research. Without me, many of those creatures would have become extinct. So he's got a rationale for why he did this. And Della says, I think a few million people becoming extinct is rather more serious. So she's got a counterpunch. And then he says, but they had a choice. It was their own fault they became addicted. And so I like this. This is a really philosophically intricate exchange of point-counterpoint here, where they're both making good points. Now, ultimately, Della is correct. But what I like here is this is not a cardboard villain who wants to conquer the universe and then cackle afterwards.
Right.
This is much more sophisticated, and he's making a moral argument. It's an ultimately unsuccessful argument, but it's one that you can see someone I mean, he is more morally sensitive than I think a lot of actual drug sellers are.
Right. He's not just, I'm doing evil for evil's sake, sort of like the master at times.
Yeah.
Whereas, he has, like you said, a rationale. He thinks he's doing a good and a higher good than whatever evil he causes. Is how he's weighing it. So yeah, I think that was some sophisticated writing. There's a character we haven't mentioned yet, Stott. Stott was part of Trist's expedition, who they thought died, on Eden, but he actually survived, and he's inside the simulation. And it turns out Stott was an undercover, what we would call an
agent. Yeah,
DEA agent or an undercover narc, and he's trying to catch the drug smuggling and has cottoned on to Trist being at part of it, and teams up with the Dr. Romana.
He knows that Trist's expedition has drug smuggling going through it, but he doesn't know what the source of the drug is.
Yeah.
In fact, he says he's been locked in the simulation for in the zoo for 18 months or something.
Right.
He says, I've been searching and I can't find it. He doesn't realize it's the mandrels if you electrocute them.
Yes.
And he also doesn't know that it's Trask who's the smuggler. He thinks Trask is blind and does not realize his expedition is being used to smuggle drugs. So
Trist.
Trist, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. And there is a scene where the Doctor and Romana and Stott have all gone to this power room aboard the big Starliner. I can never remember the name of what it was.
Empress,
thank you. That's classically a Starliner name. And the Doctor ends up getting attacked by a mandrill. See, the for some reason, the what happened between the two ships has caused the Eden storage crystal thingy to be able to interface at random places in the ship. Mm-hmm. And so a mandrill comes out, and it's kind of funny. He attacks the Doctor. Stott is just kind of standing there staring at the thing as it's attacking the Doctor. He doesn't do anything. He just kind of watches. They K9 shoots it. It falls, and the Doctor tells Romana, "Oh, don't worry, it's dead." And I'm looking, going, the actor's breathing.
Well.
It's clearly, but the fact is it wasn't actually dead.
Right.
And that was, so I didn't know if that was just, whether it was an acting, directing problem, or there was the intention of leaving a clue or not. But given the way that this production went, like we talked about, it probably was just a acting, directing problem.
Yeah. I was at, once when I was at OakCon, I was listening to a panel that Forrest J. Ackerman was on. Forrest J. Ackerman was a big guy in science fiction fandom back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. He published Famous Monsters magazine, for example. And he had also done a little bit of acting in, I don't know in what movies, but, low-budget horror movies. And in one of them, the monster, kills him by knocking him over. And so he was telling this story about being on the set, and because he'd seen so many actors who were supposed to be dead breathing, he decided, I'm going to do this really well. No one's going to be able to tell that I'm still alive. I'm going to hold my breath and make it look really good. And so he goes to do the scene. The monster kills him. He falls down and he doesn't breathe, and he just holds his breath, and he's waiting for the director to yell cut. And eventually he hears his wife say, I think something's wrong with my husband.
That's funny. So ruining the scene. That's funny. Yeah. Another thing I noticed was on the Hecate Diamond ship,
Diamond.
The Doctor
they keep pronouncing it Diamond, even though it's spelled diamond with a Y.
Yeah. So Diamond, the Doctor sneaks aboard in the funniest way possible. He he's literally right behind. Was it?
So this is when Diamond is going, after the ships have been separated, Diamond is going back to the Empress, and he's got a shuttle. And this was a nicely played scene, because Diamond puts on a spacesuit with a hose, with an air hose, and he gets on board, and the Doctor has gotten on board the same shuttle and has just gotten behind the pilot's seat.
Like literally right there.
Yeah. And Dimon, because he's got restricted, peripheral vision or something with his space helmet on, he doesn't notice the doctor there. So Dimon gets on board. He plugs in his air hose into a socket, and the doctor sees him do that. And it's at that moment the doctor realizes there's not going to be any air on this shuttle. And so and they play this with no dialogue, no characters refer to this. It is all visual. The doctor then just takes a deep breath and puts himself and closes his eyes. So like he's going into a trance. And then the shuttle, we see the shuttle bay door open. We see the shuttle from behind. It launches out, which is nice. I mean, for the low budget special effects, I thought this was still nice. And then when it gets to the Empress, Dimon gets out, and then the doctor opens his eyes and has a little jerk and starts breathing again. Yep. And we hear the sound of his breath, and we know there's air again. And I like how there's just no dialogue here. They do all of that visually.
Right. And it's, Baker's great acting that lets exactly what he's thinking. On Dimon's ship, the doctor sneaks aboard, and he goes to the computer screen, and there's a convenient 3-line spreadsheet with a profit loss statement on the drug smuggling. I laughed out loud at that one.
How did he bring that up so fast?
Yes, and it's conveniently, here's our profit on our drug smuggling. In 3 convenient little lines. It was funny.
Out of 13 million money units, you're going to make a profit of 9.1 million money units.
That's a pretty good profit, that's for sure. So let's see. I'm trying to think of anything else.
That's like a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 return on investment.
Yeah. Yes. I did like the doctor repeatedly telling Trist how unstable the CET machine is.
Both he and Romana really run it down
to the point where Trist kind of gets alarmed at how unstable. Oh, you didn't install that phase inverter. Oh, that's brave of you. It was I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know if I've got. Oh, there was one. The doctor does have one line right at the beginning when he and Romana land aboard on the TARDIS, aboard the Empress. She asks, should we interfere? And because there's an alarm going off, should we really be interfered here? And the doctor says, of course we should interfere. Always do what you're best at is what I say. Yeah. If that sums up Doctor Who, I don't know what it does. So that's good. Do you have any other notes on this one?
Let's see. So one thing we mentioned is at some point, Rig takes a drink that has been spiked. And there seem to be 2 problems with this. Della has gone to this drinks machine to get a drink out of it, and she's not getting the drink for Rig. If I recall correctly, she's getting it for Romana.
Yes.
And instead, Rig, and then we see a hand come in and spike the drink while they're not looking. And then Rig takes it and says, oh, I'll take this one. And she gets another one for Romana. And it's like, who spiked that drink?
Trist?
It's got to be, based on what we later find out, it's either got to be Trist or it's got to be Dimmond. But this isn't never revealed.
Yeah.
They needed to tie this up. And it's like, why were they trying, who did it and why were they trying to get Romana high? So there's that. Then there is when the Azuran officials come on board, or since Azure is itself an adjective, maybe I should just say the Azure come on board. Fisk is like not very good at his job. He is adamant to ridiculous extremes where he has this idea that criminals just do strange stuff. So all you need as an explanation is, well, this person's a criminal, and that's why they did this inexplicable thing.
Right.
And I think this is meant to be played for comedy, but it doesn't quite come off that way. He also authorizes lethal force against the Doctor and Romana. It's like
no justification for it. Yeah.
Yeah. No justice system in the developed world is going to authorize lethal force in this situation. I mean, police officers cannot, and water guards. This guy is like a port official. Yeah. He's not even really a policeman.
Right.
But even if he were, police do not give orders like, go find this person. If they result, shoot them to death.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
And he latches on to the Dr. Romana being the smugglers way too easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without evidence.
Yeah. Also, they have the death penalty for drug trafficking in this culture, which is, I guess you can justify that in terms of what they've told us about Vraxoan, but that's really harsh.
Welcome to Singapore.
Yeah. So those are, I guess, my basic notes. Oh, one thing. So two other small things. At one point, Romana knocks out, it's either Fisk or Costa, and he's been threatening her with a laser pistol and on the bridge. And when they separate the ships, there's this jarring, violent separation, and she's knocked to the ground, the guard's knocked to the ground, and that's what stops him from shooting her, because she needed to press a certain button and to separate the ships, and he was going to shoot her if she did, but then she presses it. There's this jarring, violent separation. They're both knocked down, and she gets up first and then kicks his gun slightly away from him and then runs out into the hall. And it's like, Romana, take the gun.
Yes.
If someone's just been threatening your life, don't kick it 3 feet away from them, because he then just picks it up and follows her.
Yeah. Take the gun, leave the cannoli.
Yeah. At least if you're going to hide the gun better than you did, don't just kick it slightly away.
Yeah.
So that's tactically implausible. One thing that I did like with the mandrills, and I've also got to keep them separate in my mind from the simian animal here on Earth known as a mandrill.
Right.
So it's not the best name for them, but they're normally these violent lumbering monsters, and the Doctor at one point, and they're trying to herd him back into the Eden data crystal, into that recording, and the Doctor, they're using them. They're using guns. You have there's like 5 of these mandrills loose, and they actually have 5 mandrill costumes,
right?
Which is nice. But you have different groups of people herding them. So like one group is herding 2 of them, another group is herding 3 of them, and they're pointing guns at them, and the mandrills periodically rebel, and they have to shoot them to get them to comply again, and they're herding them down the corridors. At one point, one of the mandrills actually does damage to a human. It's like knocks it out.
Yeah.
It knocks the human out. And then when they meet up, the Doctor's there, and he takes his dog whistle for K9 and starts blowing on his dog whistle, and the mandrills become subdued, and they start following the Doctor, and they're making this weird warbling noise. It's like they're into this dog whistle, and he's able to lead them into the recording. And so I thought that was a nice, clever solution that was better than just only using the guns to get him to comply.
Yep. Yep.
So he's kind of the Pied Piper of Eden there.
That's the Doctor. All right. So I think that'll do it for this time, this discussion. Before we go, we do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Mario S., Cameron C., Bo B., Brian B., and Kenneth W. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you by Exodus 90 and the Exodus 90 app. Men, we are called to share the hope and joy of Jesus Christ. Our family, friends, and community desperately need us to imitate our Lord to be radically present and available. What if you intentionally live this Advent season differently, focused not on buying Christmas presents, but sharing the loving presence of Jesus Christ? We want to invite you to join us on the Exodus 90 app and break out of the religion of the world. Join the men of Exodus 90 and Monsignor James Shea, president of the University of Mary, who's our spiritual guide for Advent this year on the Exodus 90 app. Together, we will rediscover the hope that God lays out for us in the coming of His Son into the world. Go to exodus90.com/SQPN to learn more about Advent on the Exodus 90 app. That's exodus90.com/SQPN to join men from around the world this Advent starting December 1st. Be radically free in Jesus Christ this Advent. We'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us this time. What did you think of Nightmare of Eden? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Or you can watch the Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should obviously subscribe, like, and comment. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing a special episode. This is going to be the 15th Doctor's Christmas special, Joy to the World. So, until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I don't work for anybody. I'm just having fun.